The highest earning media franchise of all time is Pokemon, followed by Hello Kitty, and close behind that, with a staggering total of over $80 billion, the third highest earning media franchise of all time is Winnie-the-Pooh. That's more than Star Wars, more than Harry Potter, more than the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe. That's a lot of honey. So how did this silly old bear do it? Sorry. When I was a kid, like virtually every other kid, I certainly loved Winnie-the-Pooh. But as I got a little older, I fell in love with a different piece of media. Calvin and Hobbes. Like Winnie-the-Pooh, Calvin and Hobbes also centers around the adventures of a little boy and a stuffed animal that comes to life. Many of their escapades take place in the vast woods near the boy's house, and both stories draw on the power of childhood imagination to captivate readers. But there is a key difference between Calvin and Hobbes and Winnie-the-Pooh. It's also a key difference between Calvin and Hobbes and almost any comparable work of art. The comic strip's creator, Bill Watterson, chose never to merchandise it. In case you didn't know, all those peeing Calvin stickers you see on trucks are illegal, unlicensed merchandise. As for Winnie-the-Pooh, when Stephen Schlesinger purchased the US and Canadian merchandising rights for it in 1930, the floodgates were opened. If we drill down into this $80 billion number, we quickly see that the sales of the original books, as well as box office and home entertainment revenue, are barely even a drop in the bucket. It's all stuff. And there is a lot of stuff with that cute little bear emblazoned on it. At this point, it's easy to paint a somewhat cynical picture of Winnie-the-Pooh's success. Take an adorable bear, combine capitalism, mass marketing, and consumerist culture, especially the type aimed at children, and sit back while the billions roll in. But maybe that's not giving the tubby little cubby all stuffed with fluff enough credit. Side note, if you haven't heard the original Winnie-the-Pooh song or the theme song to the New Adventures of Winnie-the-Pooh in a while, you should definitely give them both a listen. They're kinda bangers. I'd play a sample, but I'm too afraid of Disney's ruthless copyright enforcement. Although, speaking of which, you may have come across a trailer for this somewhat gruesome-looking film, Winnie-the-Pooh, Blood and Honey. Whoa. That's kind of wild, doesn't really seem like the kind of thing Disney would greenlight. But that's because the US copyright for A.A. Milne's original story actually expired at the end of 2021, meaning that Winnie-the-Pooh is now in the public domain. And it indeed may be the case that this ultimately does start to cut into Disney's massive Pooh-based profits. That said, the familiar red-shirted depiction created by Disney is still protected by their trademark. So if you want to create your own slasher flick style adaptation, you'll still need to make it different enough as to be differentiated from Disney's intellectual property. But hopefully whatever you come up with is a bit better than Blood and Honey, which received impressively terrible reviews and was seemingly just a lackluster attempt to capitalize on the copyright expiration with a dark, edgy take. Of course, the legacy of Winnie-the-Pooh isn't quite as rosy as its happy-go-lucky subject matter either. Apparently, the real-life Christopher Robin Milne, who the character in the book is based on, eventually came to resent the overwhelming popularity of Pooh, as he felt the fame it brought to him ultimately overshadowed his life, as well as leading him to being bullied multiple times in school throughout his childhood. But perhaps the fact that Christopher Robin was a real boy and the characters of Pooh, Tigger, Eeyore, Piglet, Roo, and Kanga were based on real stuffed animals was an important part of Winnie-the-Pooh's success. According to an article in the British magazine Prospect, such blurring of fact and fiction doubtless sparked the imagination of the children who first read the stories, and the fact that the real Christopher could be contacted via letter, often responding to fan mail with help from his nanny, brought an extra dimension of realism to the illustrated tales. Indeed, it was the celebrity of Milne's son that kick-started the Winnie-the-Pooh franchise. In a way, Winnie-the-Pooh exists in a realm that is simultaneously real and imaginary. For children living in the time the story was written, the existence of a real Christopher Robin, a real 100-acre wood, which was based on Ashdown Forest in East Sussex, and real stuffed animals would have made the magical world of Pooh feel very much within reach. A.A. Milne wrote Winnie-the-Pooh after returning from the horrors of World War I, and it's been speculated that the innocent, uplifting tales were in part a way to deal with the lasting trauma of the battlefield. Published in the mid-1920s, the first Winnie-the-Pooh book coincided with the end of the post-World War I boom of prosperity and the impending darkness of the Great Depression and subsequently the Second World War. So it's not hard to imagine that Pooh was very much in the right time and place to provide a valuable escape from the harsh realities of the 20th century for both children and their parents. As subsequent generations of children have grown up with Pooh, they have grown up in a world where playing outside in a vast forest with stuffed animals is increasingly more something you only read about in a book or watch on a screen. As much as the vision of idyllic romps through nature filled with imaginary friends and stretching across endless carefree summer days is deeply embedded in our collective consciousness, it's something many kids will never truly experience firsthand. Sorry, that got a little dark. The best-selling Tao of Pooh shows a surprising compatibility between Pooh's carefree attitude and simple approach to life and the ancient Chinese principles of Taoism. In another, less well-known book called Pooh and the Philosophers, the author argues that all of Western philosophy is merely a preamble to Winnie-the-Pooh. I guess I don't immediately have a counter-argument to that. There's also a theory that each of the characters in Winnie-the-Pooh represent a different mental health disorder, which is interesting, I guess. I think with any compelling work of fiction, it's possible to layer on many different philosophical interpretations that may or may not align with the original author's intention. It's also tempting to declare that Winnie-the-Pooh instills children with deep moral truths and profound lessons about life, and maybe that's true in some cases, but it seems just as likely that most children view Pooh as simply an adorable and hilarious little bear that doesn't need to teach them anything. Plenty has been written about why Winnie-the-Pooh has captured so many hearts and minds over the years, but I think at its core, the true magic of the tales can't be put into words. Well, the original stories are books, so I guess by definition it's a type of magic that can be put into words, but you know what I mean. Writing about his decision to never merchandise Calvin and Hobbes, Bill Watterson explains that he didn't want an animation studio giving Hobbes a voice or a greeting card company using Calvin to wish someone a happy anniversary. In his words, "When everything fun and magical is turned into something for sale, the strip's world is diminished. Calvin and Hobbes was designed to be a comic strip, and that's all I want it to be." Watterson's commitment to artistic integrity is admirable, especially considering the millions upon millions of dollars he sacrificed in order to maintain it. Another concern he expressed was that oversaturating the market with countless Calvin and Hobbes products would simply cause the public to grow bored and irritated with the characters. Clearly, in the case of Winnie-the-Pooh, however, the endless stream of merchandising hasn't harmed the bear's enduring popularity. But maybe it is worth asking if the endless Disneyification of Pooh hasn't at least somewhat diminished the purity and charm of its source material. According to an article in Smithsonian Magazine, the original Pooh books have actually survived quite well when you compare them to other Disney adaptations. Consider poor Hans Christian Andersen's The Snow Queen, which most kids only know via the $400 million box office adaptation Frozen, or, for that matter, Andersen's The Little Mermaid. What's amazing about Pooh's modern cartoony familiarity is that as big as the Magic Kingdom is, the original not only survives, but thrives as a continued source of fascination. And it's true that the Winnie-the-Pooh books remain among the best-selling books of all time with over 70 million copies sold. But the fact remains that since the Disney adaptations were released, most children, unless your parents tried very hard to shelter you from one of the versions, have grown up alongside both the books and the animations. If you grew up as I did during the ascendant rise of Harry Potter, the first 4 books were written and published before the release of the first movie, and so to read them meant inventing your own images of Harry, Ron, and Hermione and conjuring your own voices for them as you read their dialogue. I remember the 2001 release of the first Harry Potter movie as a turning point, because I knew deep down that my imagined versions of the characters would inevitably be replaced by Daniel Radcliffe, Rupert Grint, and Emma Watson. Today, I have no idea what Harry Potter looked and sounded like in my head before he was personified on the screen. Although it's safe to say my version probably didn't have a British accent, so I guess that's a bit of an improvement. It's interesting to imagine a reality where Milne took the same steadfast approach with Winnie-the-Pooh as Bill Watterson did with Calvin and Hobbes, where the only version of Pooh's voice we know is the one we hear in our heads, or the one our parents came up with while reading us the books aloud. But without such an unwavering commitment to artistic purity, a character as enduring as Winnie-the-Pooh will inevitably take on a life of his own. If you want to wallpaper your baby's nursery with Winnie-the-Pooh decals, and cover your baby with Winnie-the-Pooh diapers, and cover those with a cute Pooh Bear outfit, you can do that. But you can also read that same kid the original books that children have been enjoying for nearly 100 years. It's certainly tempting to blame Disney for stripping away the pure soul of Pooh to instead turn him into merely an empty shell used only to market and sell products, and there may be some truth to that. But it's not the full story. Winnie-the-Pooh has made billions because people love Winnie-the-Pooh. And now that the original stories are in the public domain, we're free to explore and evolve those timeless characters in new and exciting ways. Maybe Blood and Honey 2, yes, that's currently in production, will be a vast improvement from the first movie and actually explore some new and interesting philosophical territory through the medium of Winnie-the-Pooh. But I'm not holding my breath. The end of The House at Pooh Corner, the last paragraph of the original stories, goes like this. So they went off together. But wherever they go, and whatever happens to them on the way, in that enchanted place on the top of the forest, a little boy and his bear will always be playing. When A.A. Milne wrote that, he couldn't possibly have known just how true it would turn out to be.